So what we thought we'd do is at Brilliant Noise we deal with digital strategy and innovation. We talk about audiences and communities, which means too much and yet too little, and some of the approaches that we use for working with them and changing behaviours. But to make sure that it was really, really useful, we asked our favourite data analysing friends from Brandwatch to give us some hard facts about how to listen to audiences and how to use that in programming. So I'm Andy. No, I'm Antony.
I'm Andy. Hello.
Andy. And we are a double act just because. So one of the things, like looking at TV, we don't just work with TV, and I think that's one of the things that we've got that's like to bring some interesting perspectives today and some insights from other clients and working with communities and with data. Because whichever industry you're in, whichever creative pursuit you're involved in, everyone's being disrupted. Everyone's having to come to terms with data, come to terms with new definitions of what an audience is, what a customer is, what the kind of behaviours are that they're trying to influence and measure. And one of the things that looking at TV production I always thought about was that there were these kind of three camps who battled between each other of production and sometimes commissioning and creative and commercial. And what we'll put the case for today is that data should be at the table along with those four and have kind of an equal amount of power, but not be dominant. We'll come back to that. I'm going to talk about three things briefly. I'm going to talk about movements and data. I'm going to talk about live audience lessons and some work that we did at Brilliant Noise. And then I'm going to talk about maintaining tension between those things. So in terms of working with audiences, I think that in almost every sphere where we see people working with data in anything other than e-commerce and that kind of mechanical pushing people through a funnel, we see people underusing data and not really appreciating its full potential. We throw around a lot of terms about measurement and about big data, but much like Matt said about being between two worlds of broadcast and digital, how we think about and how we use data we're completely in flux about that. And I don't think I've included a slide here, but I would highly recommend to everybody a book called Big Data by Kenneth Cukier, who is the data editor of The Economist, which explains in non-numbers people terms that strategists and creatives can understand what the opportunity is with all of this data to think differently about audiences and to think differently about businesses. So the main thing that we think that we need to do with audiences in TV, with the kind of data opportunity, the opportunity to listen to them, is to embrace the complexity of it. And one of the kind of mental models that we have to shift away from, as Matt really definitely said earlier on, is this idea of the audience as one thing. And I think we're hearing that as well from one of the previous speakers from the BBC. Good year. And what we're saying is stop thinking of them of one great lump or one great herd that you're trying to shove through a funnel or trying to enhance with some digital tools. They don't all want the same thing, they don't all behave in the same way, but that isn't a bad thing. That's a massive opportunity for TV and for creative. So I wanted to talk about innovating like a big movement, like a mass movement, and I think the best use of data that we've seen anywhere and that we could draw inspiration from in the TV world recently was the US elections in 2012 and the Obama campaign's use of data. The Obama campaign employed 50 data scientists, which was 30 more than the opposing campaign, and devoted a huge amount of resources to measuring in detail what people thought about the election. They ran the election 6,000 times every night in simulation, one of the data scientists said. And the way they went about that was fascinating, because they didn't think about that data as being, what's the one message that we need to get out there? What's the one TV spot that we need to buy? What's the one way we need to talk about the president? They thought about it in myriad detail, and they thought about it in terms of the stories that they tell and that people tell each other. So Obama had the most quants on the staff. Nate Silver predicted the surprise result. So there was this kind of sense in the media narrative afterwards that it was the quants that won it. But Felix Salmon, the financial writer, actually nailed it when he said that the crucial thing about this campaign and why it's fascinating to everybody outside of politics, and I urge you to take a close look at the case study, is that people used their databases and models so that Americans could tell stories to each other. They used it to get down to the kind of detail that in Ohio, people of a certain demographic needed to talk to other people of a certain demographic to encourage them to get out and vote, and that would swing the election in their favour. So I appreciate that's quite a high-level example, but I do think it's really inspirational, and I'd recommend taking a look at it. Now, I want to talk about working with live. and working with big live, I suppose, big lumps of spiky live attention, and not that long live model that Matt was talking about, but the kind of more traditional X Factor or TOWIE or awards ceremonies is actually what we'd worked with. I did have a lovely picture of Adele with an armful of Grammys to go here, but then I was forced to sign something before I came on stage saying that I owned the rights to everything, and I patently didn't own the rights to that. So you just have to look at this thing saying awards and big attention. When you see award ceremonies are fascinating. We did some work with something else, a TV production company, and we've done some kind of research with Brown Watch separately around this as well. Is when you look at award ceremonies and trying to do digital media around them, what you've got is this huge spike of attention over a 2-3 hour period, and it's just fascinating. I think the Brits get 2 or 3 million tweets, and the Grammys had 13 million tweets as a kind of benchmark of some of the attention and conversation going on around them. And we just felt that there were two things that were going on here with the awards themselves and with TV companies. They're getting smarter about this, but they weren't making the most of the opportunity, and they were still seeing the audience as one audience and one conversation, and what could they do to drive that. There wasn't a huge production effort behind getting content out there live during that, and there wasn't an appreciation of the different types of audiences that you had at the same time. People who were interested in fashion, people who were interested in the gossip, people who were interested in One Direction, which actually was the majority of the conversation. But there were all sorts of people with different audience needs that could be served during that. And we also felt that one of the things that you could see from measuring that live attention, which we did with Brown Watch and other data, was that there was this awful kind of wastage of, it was kind of as if there was a live conversation on the radio and it wasn't recorded, that there was all this rich content that was being created and this rich experience that was being created, but there was nothing left afterwards other than stories about how many million tweets there were. And so that inspired us to build a prototype, which I thought we'd show you today, using one of our partner technologies called StoryStream, to kind of build a montage, a collage of people talking to each other about a live event. And one of our clients, actually upstairs, is the Pitch House Cinemas, and they kind of have a weird cinema version of TV. I don't know if you've come across it, called Arts and Events. So they'll have the David Bowie exhibition, or they'll have a National Theatre play, and all around the country people will simultaneously sit down and pay and watch that. But for the launch of the Stone Roses Made of Stone movie by Shane Meadows, they had a simulcast across 200 cinemas across the country. So like 200 cinemas of people watching TV, but it's the cinema, if you get what I mean. And they had a huge fan base of ageing chaps like myself who loved the Stone Roses in the early 90s and still do. And that's what the film's all about. It's all about the stories of the fans and the band's devotion to their fans as well. So what we did was use kind of data and listening very closely to the audience to begin to put together a kind of a collage and a stream of interesting quotes and photos and videos that people were putting up there, and responded to what people were responding to during the live event at the various cinemas, and especially at the big warehouse event in Manchester. And appreciate this is not a TV programme, but it's got elements that are similar, and it was a great place to test this out. And one of the real surprises in all of this that we came across was just how powerful Vine was in it. We really weren't expecting it, but once we put Vine, which is really easy to embed into things, we started to realise that it brought the page alive even more on the iPad app and on the desktop. And you can see there's a picture of the projector just at the beginning. And then we had a crew of people on the ground who didn't have TV cameras. They had iPhones and smartphones, and one person with a laptop in a back room, Todd, who's sitting over there, and not in a back room, but piecing this together and kind of putting together this parallel story to the story of the night live. And we started to see people, when people were going on stage, when people were talking on the stage, that built up a kind of this beautiful moving montage of video. And then that was also on big screens around the place. And we also started, obviously, bastardizing the English language, as you do in marketing at the moment when you have a new toy, and invented the Vine-to-View on the red carpet where stars, one of the stars of Made in England, I think. And I'm not going to play the audio because he was very foul-mouthed. But everybody would stop and give us a 6-second interview, and we were throwing that into the mix, but also the video that the fans were doing and the photos and the tweets as well. And we started to play around with multiple perspective montages of the same moment with 3 or 4 people with iPhones on the carpet. It was just really, really good fun. But behind it all, this is the production room at the back, and this isn't the production team for the story stream that we were doing. That's just that person there. Everybody else is doing the TV and doing the live broadcast, but we were in a kind of lightweight way building this live stream of fans telling each other the story of what was going on, throwing in our own content. And then at the end, reverse the chronology, and it's like a little takeaway brochure for people's iPads, free web app, for them to see the story of the night and what happened there. And just linking it through back to, you can take a look at it there if you want to on various smart devices, but just linking that back to what Phil said at the beginning of ways to make money, playing in this way, and this was not expensive, it's really easy to do and piece together. This is not like building a new app from scratch and all of that kind of thing, but we also did it for events like Goodwood Festival of Speed, which then used it as another opportunity to get sponsorship, and so they got Credit Suisse sponsoring this app, and it kind of became a live brochure made up out of other people's tweets. Anyway, that's an example of using data as an inspiration to try out different things and try out different ways of telling stories with the audience. Just in terms of maintaining tension, there was just a point that I wanted to make about adding data into the team, and I did have a kind of a hideous vision of the future slide here about BuzzFeed and BuzzFeed-style television, which obviously will emerge and probably exists in some kind of form at the moment. But adding data people into the team doesn't mean that data's in charge, but it doesn't mean that necessarily creative or commercial or production are in charge. It just means that it's another player at the table. And I saw Ed Catmull of Pixar speaking in San Francisco a couple of months ago, and one of the things he said that was most interesting to me about managing a creative process or a creative organisation was that out of production and creative and commercial, I didn't mention data, but he should have, out of those 3 things, no one should win. And the moment that someone wins is the moment that a studio or a creative team starts to collapse. And he cited the example of Disney Studios, where he said production won. So films were produced on schedule and looked like Disney films should, but the creative talent was kind of leaking away from them, seeping away from them. Not anymore, obviously, because he's in charge now. But anyway, I hope some of those things are useful. I know they're kind of from the left field when it comes to television, but I'm going to pass the mic.
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
No.
I'm going to pass over to Andy to talk about actual data.
Do you have the clicker thing, or do I just shout at you to press the button?
Yeah, shout at me.
Okay. So hi, I'm Andy. I'm from Brandwatch. We've been bigged up by everyone in the room because we're well good. But for those of you that don't know us, we're a social media monitoring tool. So we track conversations, brands, interactions across the social web. That could be anything from important conversations around cheese to how well your latest trailer is doing for a new game. So here we're looking at the new Batman game, which is coming out, which is I'm really, really excited about because I like Batman. But also we track serious issues as well. So we work very closely with some agencies who work with government bodies who are tracking the reaction to the badger cull, which is quite a hot topic at the moment. Incidentally, if you just click onto the next slide, the cheese stuff, if you're interested, is it's very, very difficult to do, but it's really worth it if you put the effort in. Anywho, I digress. Television, because I'm not going to be up by Vine-to-View ever. So everyone knows Twitter, it's kind of good, and people have probably seen television, and those 2 things are coming together very tightly. Twitter have worked out that actually, if we just skip on a slide, sorry, it's not that, it's maybe not that Twitter's changing how TV is being viewed, it's how people are interacting with what's going on screen. So we've been looking at this very closely. We work with a lot of agencies who do ad planning. We work with a lot of agencies who are involved in film or TV production. So we took a view on this that actually it'd be really interesting for us to see if we can find any correlations between TV shows or if we can find patterns or listen to the audiences and really work out what's happening when people are watching shows, and does it change if they're watching it live, does it change if they're watching it on demand, and all these different ways of viewing, but whenever anyone's doing it, it's always in tandem, pretty much. So a couple of stats, the science bit, pay attention, kids. One of these may not surprise you. When people are watching TV programs, they tend to talk about it on Twitter. Not that surprising. What may surprise you is that when people are tweeting about a TV program they're watching, they're more likely to be negative than when they're talking about it after the TV program. So it's kind of interesting. It's worth paying attention to. And when people are tweeting, what you've got is a lot of people are using hashtags. Loads and loads of people, 83% of TV programs, when people are talking about them, they're using a hashtag. What's surprising from a production point of view is when people are putting out these TV programs, less than half of the TV programs go out with the official hashtag on it. So people are sourcing this themselves, or in the case of The Apprentice, they're misspelling this themselves and just putting stuff out. So you've got all sorts of stuff happening where there's an opportunity there. If you're putting content out, what do you want people to talk about? Put it in front of them. So we looked at that. We've looked at a few TV programs. We're going to run you through a few case studies, some of the bigger shows that we've been looking at over the last year or so. So we did this, we watched 23-ish production companies last year, and we whittled it down to these three, which we figured were the most interesting in terms of conversation that was going on online, but also the amount of conversation, the type of conversation. I've not watched any of them, but I believe MasterChef is a cookery program.
You've read the tweets, right?
I've read the tweets. Big Brother is some sort of live idiot watching, and Towie is amazing, apparently. So if we can go through these. So MasterChef, this was the celebrity series that we were monitoring. So if you just skip on one slide. What we were doing is, and I'm going to not use big data, I'm going to use connected data. What we were looking at is volumes of conversations from Twitter, but tying that back into other sources of data that people should have access to. So in this case, Barb data. So is a lot of people talking on Twitter the same as a lot of people watching the TV programs? And in the case of MasterChef, yeah, that seems to be what's happening. We're getting a lot of people tweeting whilst they're watching the show. And that may be to do with the time of day it's on, it may be to do with the fact that it's about cooking, but if Antony can click on, should I just make a noise? All right.
I was just really interested in this.
So what we then start to do is then dig into, so okay, these spikes are happening, this conversation is going on, but what are people talking about when they're doing this? And it's obvious stuff. It's like people talking about being hungry and watching it. And this is this is the equivalent of going to a supermarket whilst hungry for me. It's like watching MasterChef whilst hungry is apparently a very bad idea. So you get a lot of people talking about that. And this is a really good opportunity. If you're putting this out, link through somewhere to recipes. Just make sure you're putting the content in front of the people that are interested in this and talking about this, and really use that as a way of engaging with your audience. And then we then looked at how this volume of conversation was mapping against sentiment. So what do people think about, how they're reacting, what's happening at different minutes within the program. So this is the final. And this is the people talking about the backstory, so all the lovely soft focus, emotional stuff about how everyone's really proud to be there doing things. I'm not sure if you can see the coloured lines. Can you see it on those side monitors? So it's tying in to who's got the most buzz around them. So Anton's story here was really popular. Loads of people were really moved by it. And then talking about the menus and who had the most exciting menus, and then talking about what that was about. The ending is really interesting. So if we skip on to this. Anton and Kerry, program was a tie. The producers said that they couldn't pick a winner because it was so close. If you looked at the social data, everyone was behind Anton. And what you're doing here is seeing the real reaction to the TV program as opposed to the exec's reaction. And maybe this is going to cause problems. Maybe you're going to lose your audience. Maybe if you force an opinion on and not pay attention to what's going on around your TV show, around any program, around anything, it's kind of, you're going to lose trust in your audience. So what we're suggesting is, pay attention to what's going on. Don't fix anything. Don't rig it based on Twitter, but at least pay attention to what your audience is saying. Big Brother. This is its 13th series, and people are losing interest in it rapidly. No one really wants to watch it anymore. Everyone's slagging it off. The viewing figures are very, very low, apart from a few occasional spikes. And what's interesting with these spikes is they're not necessarily about the TV program or stuff that's happening in the TV program. So we dug into them. What's happening when people are talking about this? Who's saying what? Where's it being said? And why it's being said? For me, the most interesting one is day 19. There was a massive spike on the previous slide. Jonathan Ross just tweeted something his wife said to him. And that drove loads and loads of conversation online and actually pushed people back in to watch the TV program. So you can see the spike between conversation and between viewing. But it's that whole idea of don't just focus on what's going on with your program. Have a look at what's also happening with other stuff around it. So keep stuff running. If you're, pay attention, basically. What we're also seeing is a lot of negative sentiment around this, and we're trying to figure out why. So if we go one more, this is the kind of stuff that's coming up. So it's a lack of interest. There's other good stuff on the TV at the same time, or other less bad stuff, I guess. But also a lot of technical faults around voting, around being able to contact the show. And this is all frustrating. So if you are in charge of this type of thing, pay attention, review, refine, see what you can do, iterate. Your audiences are being turned away by this kind of stuff. So pay attention to them. But then also you can do that by looking at, I'm going to use that one from now on. I like that one. Yeah, could you go back? Yeah. So what we're doing here is then also looking further into this and looking at your audience is there, the ones that are engaged, what else are they interested in? Where's the opportunities to kind of cross-promote to them or make sure you're grabbing stuff that's relevant and interesting to them and putting it in front of them? So we did some analysis around these tweets and who was talking and what other stuff that they were interested in. So you've got a lot of people talking about food and drink when they're talking about Big Brother. So maybe that's to do with what's going on in the show with them cooking, or maybe you can just use opportunities to put content in front of them when they're watching your show that's going to really hold on to them. And again, what we're talking about isn't just huge amounts of data, it's digging into it, understanding what's going on and where the crossover is. We then also looked at the Anywheres Essex, and the Anywhere TOWIE is interesting for this. Has an enormous amount of character Twitter accounts. So you've got your main account running, TOWIE talking about it, you've got the main hashtag running, but then you've also got all of the individual actors involved in the program as well who've got these accounts going on. This is a brilliant opportunity to engage with the audience because people want to talk to the people that are in the show. So if you've got any of these live programs, get a character account in. If you've got any of these TV shows, build character accounts out. Engage with where your audience wants to be. But there's also a growth on that. So look at how you're doing that and what are people talking about. So the chap at the end, Billy, talks a lot. I'm sure it's all wonderfully insightful. But everyone wants to talk about Gemma, so what you can see here is the red bars are mentions by that person, the little yellow dots are people talking about them. So there's a great opportunity here to say, actually, most people are interested in Gemma, so maybe we should get Gemma to talk more, or we should try and push content out from her to engage with our audience. And then also, again, once you've done that, drill in, look at it, and this is all stuff that's really easy to do with tools like Brandwatch, or other tools are available, but none are as good. So you can look at the type of conversation that's happening around here. And just review and iterate and pay attention. This is the big thing. Lots of people, all this stuff is happening, all of this data is out there. People aren't paying attention to it. So drill into it, understand it, and refine what you're doing. Audience is giving you all the signals and all the clues that you could possibly want to make stuff a success, but if you're not paying attention to it, it's wasted. And then also tie this back to what else they're interested in. So my audience is chatting about TV, but they're also chatting about other TV programs. So is there an opportunity to see what Big Brother is doing really badly or X Factor is doing really well, and can I use that in what I'm doing with TOWIE? So take those learnings, iterate, refine, listen. That's the main thing. I think that's it.